the true talent and the reason you all come in for the show. Mr. Travis Croft, how are you, sir?
I am fine, Dandy. I'm a bit tired tonight. Regular viewers might notice there's some blue boxes behind me here. And unfortunately, to those who've fallen in love with the rather nondescript surroundings I've been using for the last year, unfortunately, I will be moving again in the not too distant future. Hopefully, to a more salubrious surrounds. A little bit. I think it's going to be quite sexy. The little setup we're going to have for just in the background. Behind me, it's going to be a little bit more interesting in a new place. But packing and moving is becoming an annual event for me. And I've done it every year since 2019.
As many times as I've had jobs.
a little bit. Like I think in this incarnation of a show, I've been through 4 different places.
Yes.
The original Electric Fright brand studios in Thomastown.
Yep.
My place in Richmond, where we started the pandemic.
Yeah.
You could forget. My place in Hawthorne, and now my current apartment in the south of Melbourne. And you're like, wow, I stayed in the same place for 10 years before that. And now it's like
it's balancing out over the course of your life, you know.
It is. Before I lived there for 10 years, I was moving every year as well. It's just like, you think you get tired of it after a while, but here we are.
You're just the thrill seeker. That's the truth of it.
It is fun. It's always fun exploring a new neighborhood for a little while. And I am moving right near the Church of Scientology, so it's going to be really exciting.
Maybe, we traveled all the way to Adelaide for a pie floater. Maybe we have a mobile episode where we experience their free.
They've got signs outside about free intelligence tests. I wonder if it'd be okay if we brought a GoPro in and filmed it. I have a feeling maybe they wouldn't be okay with that.
Maybe not.
I don't know. Why would you? You're a church. We're just exploring your religion.
Yeah.
I don't know. Don't sue me, please. Right? I don't have any money. That really should probably be the first question on their checklist. How much money do you have? Should we sue you, or you need to go clear? But it's a very, very, very impressive building. I don't know. You've seen their buildings in LA before?
Yeah. They kind of. They always reminded me of something like a cross between the architectural design of Ego Shandor's apartment block in Ghostbusters, but just put a little bit of, more sort of like 90s kind of shake and bake building on it. It's a weird thing.
It is strange. They've got those big signs that look very fancy, and they're painted blue, but they own entire blocks in LA.
Yeah. They are property rich.
But then again, I remember going on a tour in downtown LA with the Dearly Departed tours who do the famous death scene places in LA. If you're ever in LA, I highly recommend taking the Dearly Departed tour. And they was telling me they bought them in the 80s when no one wanted to live or own property in that part of town. So smart call by them. But it's a fascinating part of the city. If you're ever in LA and you have a chance to cruise past and have a look at their buildings, it's actually a fascinating thing to see because you're right. It's just a bit weird. It's like someone put the 90s through, sort of filtered them through Battlefield Earth or something, and they came out with this.
Maybe. We could have gone to Battlefield Earth.
Yeah, Broken Arrow was bad enough. I mean, we could have. It would have been interesting, I suppose. But we did instead follow my suggestion to go to Wake in Fright.
Wake in Fright. Now, this is one of somewhat legendary status, right?
It is something of a it's an infamous, once considered lost, Australian classic, I think. So we might as well crack on. Wake in Fright was made in 1971 after a bad gambling bet. A school teacher is marooned in a town full of crazy, drunk, violent men who threaten to make him just as crazy, drunk, and violent. I don't like that synopsis very much, but it's there. Famously, this film kind of was released in the 70s in Australia and didn't do well, wasn't looked upon fondly by the Australian public. Particularly, it went to Cannes where it competed for the Palme d'Or. It was released in the United States and in the UK under the title Outback. Because there's a fantastic interview with the director of his Ted Kotcheff, I think his name is. Ted Kotcheff on. You can find it on YouTube, and he says the studio in the States said, "We don't want it to be called Weekend Fright. That sounds too much like a Hitchcock film." And he's like, "And so that's a bad thing now?"
Like, oh no, please.
So they called it Outback instead, and then it disappeared. It was considered lost for many, many, many years until the negatives were discovered in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, for some reason in an Iron Mountain facility, I think it says. But where the film was restored, painstakingly restored, almost frame by frame by people who were doing it almost out of a love for it. I think there's a great deal of other material was discovered later, but it's now been restored. It's available on DVD, available on your streaming services, available on YouTube, apparently. I didn't realize that after paying for it. I'm like,
Sure. I will happily take it for free.
But yes, but interestingly, on its re-release, it's become this lauded classic. It's interesting how that happens sometimes, where films in their original time period were kind of like, no, thank you, none of that. But when they're rediscovered 30 years later, all of a sudden people are like, wow, like how did we space on this one?
Because this is one of the movies that Tarantino kind of helped re-pioneer somewhat because of the exploitation attitude.
It's an exploitation classic. Also, Martin Scorsese has been a huge support of it. There's a fantastic little snippet here in the trivia on IMDb. Among the directors in attendance during the film screening at the 1971 Cannes Film Festival was a young man who sat directly behind Ted Kotcheff. The director noted that throughout the screening, the man excitedly made commentary on the on-screen action, such as, wow, what a scene. Boy, I didn't expect that. That's great. His remarks reached their zenith during John and Doc's homosexual encounter, during which he said, this director, he's going to go all the way. He's going all the way. He's going all the way. Oh, my God, he went all the way. Pleased by his reaction, Kotcheff asked the film's PR manager to identify the eager young man for him, Martin Scorsese, an unknown in the industry, whose only film to that point had flopped. Yada, yada, yada. One of his quotes ended up being used on the DVD and the advertising campaign when it was re-released years later. It left me speechless. So I think if you win over Scorsese and Tarantino, you probably made something pretty decent. I'm curious about what you made of it. As this is interesting. This is a film about Australia by outsiders, and you're 50-50 now.
I'm still definitely more an outsider. I definitely connected with Gary Bond in some way. This I will happily put my hand up and say this was tough to watch. Not necessarily because of what was being shown to me, but just because of the style of it. It's a type of movie that I generally just don't like very much. And I'm surprised.
What kind of film is that, do you think? How would you describe it as if you were trying to describe it to someone who hadn't seen it, which is probably most of our audience?
This is a movie which it skirts that line of nothing's happening and everything's happening. Because there are just scenes where like nothing is happening. There's the scene after they've gone in between them doing all the kangaroo hunting, where John is just passed out in a chair and collapses, and you've got Doc just rabbiting on about Socrates and going, where the hell's Socrates? And then the two other boys in the background just having a playful fight, and then it suddenly turns like a legitimate fight, and then then Doc's just got the chair and he's like throwing around, going, blood, and it's like, what the fuck is this? It's there's shit happening, but at the same time, it's nothing. It's a weird medley, and it feels so dated, but at the same time, it feels out of time for anything, because it presents itself, and it presents the Yabba as like a legitimate place and almost like a slice of life kind of movie, and a cautionary tale of this is what could happen. This is just how the Australian outback life is. And it does that so well that the kind of insanity of the situation that John spirals on feels almost like a really perverse bastardization of Alice Through the Looking Glass, where it just gets weirder and weirder and weirder, and then it snaps back to reality. And so it's to the point where I would put this on a similar level to something like Requiem for a Dream or Pi, which are really brutal movies. Requiem for a Dream is more beautiful and more nuanced, I think, comparatively, but it's such a visceral, surgical attack on your senses that it's hard to be able to enjoy it on any real level. You experience this movie. Those kinds of movies, I've been exhausted this week, so it was not the perfect movie for me to watch while I'm kind of going, okay, I need to focus on this.
This is not a, if you were going to the cinema and this was playing and you're taking your girlfriend to the movies, this is probably not one I'd recommend.
Exactly.
It does take some energy and attention, and I always remember a line when I read a review years ago of Trainspotting. They described it as a film to be endured rather than enjoyed.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with that about Trainspotting, but maybe parts of it rather than as a whole. But I think this film is a film to be endured rather than enjoyed. But I think you can find enjoyment in that endurance.
Yes.
I don't think it's dated at all. I think this film, I couldn't disagree with you more about it being dated. I think this film is as fresh and relevant and vital as the day it was filmed. Now, it is dated in the sense, obviously, fashion, hairstyles, music, technology, and, I guess to some degree, hopefully, Australia be a different place.
I like to think Australia has progressed because
in the last 50 years. But I think this is a takedown on masculinity. I think that's its core message. I think that scene in particular you're talking about there is an exploration or an attack or on Australian ideas about masculinity. I can tell you, I don't know. I was going to tell you didn't grow up in Australia because I think I've seen that fight happen a number of times in my younger years, where it starts out lighthearted but turns out going a bit hardcore at the end. And I thought it was kind of it was a nightmare. It was like being inside a nightmare. I thought there was almost a Lynchian vibe to it at times. Like, I won't deny this is a weird film. This is a very strange film, but in the best possible way. I should give people a little bit more context on the story, in the sense that I didn't really like that basic synopsis, to give us a bit more context about what we're talking about here. So we follow the character of John Grant, played by Gary Bond, who is a British actor. He's a teacher working in a remote Australian town of Tibunda. He's under a financial bond for a government job. Basically, he has to pay $1,000 at the start of taking this job to guarantee that he'll stay for the length of his contract. It's a year, I think.
Yeah.
At the end of term before Christmas holidays, he plans to visit his girlfriend in Sydney. In order to catch a flight to Sydney, he takes a train to the nearby mining town of Bundan Yabba, or the Yabba, and plans to stay there overnight before moving on further to the airport. But things go grossly out of script. He's engulfed by the Yabba and its disconcerting residents. Again, I don't know about engulfed. He is somehow sucked into this layer of hell that is the Yabba, but it's a very unusual layer of hell in the sense everybody's very polite.
Yes. And there's that great moment at the end where he sort of like turns down the guy who's just like taking him back to town is
Yeah.
like, come on, have a beer. So like, no, I'm giving up drinking for now. They're like, oh, you dirty bastard, what the hell, you know? And he starts shouting. It's like, what's going on here? You can go hunt people, you can kill people, you can break people, and it's fine. But I turned down a beer, and it's just all hell breaks loose.
And you know, as an Australian, yes, this is a perfectly reasonable reaction. The drinking is really kind of is almost a character or a feature of a story in itself. So John bumps into Chips Rafferty, who we talked a little about last week as being one of Australia's most famous film exports once upon a time, who is the local policeman, I think. Jock Crawford.
Yep.
And he gives him sort of a tour of a town, including taking him for dinner. At the back of a place he's having dinner is a 2-up game. A 2-up is actually illegal in Australia, except on Anzac Day.
Oh,
that is true. You can play 2-up. Well, at least in Victoria, at least you can only play it, I think, on Anzac Day.
Okay.
And that's basically involves betting on flipping of 2 pennies and whether they come up heads or tails. And for our American friends in Australia, pennies were 1 cent, like you guys, but they were like really quite sizable coins, not like the tiny little ones the Americans have. And initially kind of dismissive of the game. Oh, it's a simple enough game. He after a few drinks, he decides to go back and have a go at it. Wins a few, and as with most gamblers, he ends up losing it all. And then he starts to really lose it. When the same restaurant we meet Donald Pleasance's Doc Titan, who is the town medical professional, though not actually questionable whether he actually is a doctor. He's certainly one of the few educated men in town. As you sort of noted, he was mentioning Socrates earlier, and there's this fascinating little conversation, about between the two of them at a town. He goes, the town could be worse. And how could it be worse? The beer supply could run out,
and he sort of like talks about it, saying like, oh yes, I'm an alcoholic, and so it barely registers here. Like, yep, I can see that.
And from there, he sort of sucked into this very polite vision of hell. He bumps into a man in the bar, and yet again, he's like, he's got no money, so he's like, you want a beer, mate? No, I don't want no money. I didn't ask you to buy me a beer. I said I would buy you a beer. Take that down. Have a beer, and
Al Thomas playing Tim Hines.
Great scene, that one. And he just insists on him coming back to his house. And and he just sort of descends into this horrible, like the drinking becomes repulsive. I mean, I have gone back on the booze just as an acknowledgement of the film this week. That said, though, it is Carlton Zero. This is non-alcoholic beer. I do try to drink a lot less these days, and
mine is the Spice Trade gin.
Is it actually real gin?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is alcohol-free beer, so apparently this is all the rage at the moment. You can have a good beer with no alcohol in it, and let me tell you.
This episode sponsored by alcohol.
Oh, free. And like I tell you what, that's what they're drinking in hell. That's I tell you what. But anyway, I thought I would have the beer just to sort of acknowledge it. But even catching me training, there are people drinking tinnies on the train, and it does sort of descend into this nightmare and into probably the highlight of a low light of a film is the hunting trip, as you mentioned earlier. What did you make of the kangaroo hunting trip?
Fuck, that was hard to watch. As someone who has had car accidents hitting kangaroos, and loving animals and having to put kangaroos that have been hit by vehicles out of their misery, I don't like it, didn't like the way that it was done. I appreciate the impact that they were going for, because at the end of the movie there is that big blurb talking about how it was officially licensed kangaroo
hunting scenes. The producers note at the end says the hunting scenes depicted were taken during an actual kangaroo hunt by professional licensed hunters. For this reason, and because the survival of your kangaroo is seriously threatened, These scenes were shown uncut and after consultation with leading animal welfare organisations in Australia and the United Kingdom. I read that and I'm like, in what universe was the kangaroo seriously threatened? Again, this kangaroo is not. Look, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like I am 99.9% certain that is not the case. At least not now. There have been times where they've been considered a plague. Portions. Just
go to any golf course here, and you will see a whole troop of them.
There is no shortage
every day.
No shortage of kangaroos in this country, at least not anymore. But yes, that was a visceral scene. It was incredibly violent.
But then it just gets worse with the butchering of them as well, and which one is it? I think it's Pete Whittle, who plays Joe. He goes out and he literally just kind of hand-to-hand combats one that's been injured and just butchers it. And the way that sequence is shot with the close-ups and then just screaming with kind of brutal delight as he's just slicing this kangaroo. It's really fucking hard to watch. Really hard. Like the descent into hell that that John goes on is hard to watch. It's tough. That is like just taking it 5 steps further, and especially when John decides, I'll give it a go. And he plays it. Gary Bond plays that sequence so fucking well because he's all with it when they're driving around shooting and there's the long distance, and then there's this fascination on his face as he watches Joe hand to hand it, and then it's like, do you want to give it a go? It's like, I'll give it a go. And then the fear and the sort of like more conscious side of his mind and that sort of like educated side of his mind just kind of starts weighing things through, and then you see that kind of fall away as he brutalizes a baby kangaroo that's been wounded. Fuck me, that's in every sense of the word visceral.
I guess the part that I found most shocking for me in a way, because I read about it and I knew it was coming. I guess I don't know. Maybe it came out of left field for you, but I kind of knew there was a pretty brutal kangaroo hunting scene coming. It was just the wastage of it. Like it wasn't like they were killing for food.
Yeah,
they were just leaving them there. We're just killing them for fun.
Yeah, and they were taking like the balls as trophies or something, or for dog food.
And I mean, it was at one point they killed the kangaroo for food, but most of the kangaroos that they were hitting with a car or shooting, they didn't seem to be coming back to pick up or take away for food, or some other useful purpose. And that's kind of the shocking part for me. Maybe that's a very 21st century way of looking at it. That they were just doing it for fun, really, just for shits and giggles. Is kind of a horrific way of killing time, no pun intended. There are roles of women in this film are interesting in the fact that there are very, very few. Yes. I can recall, I think, 2 speaking roles for women, not turning the little girl at the start of a film who mutters some words to a teacher on the way out. Yeah. There is Jeanette, who is the daughter, I think, of the gentleman we were talking about earlier.
I think so. Tim Hines. Yeah.
Yes, Tim Hines' daughter, I think, was the insinuation. And you can just see, she's actually got a very small role. She's played by Sylvia Kay. But I think she does a fantastic job with a very limited screen time and dialogue. You can sort of see the desperation and loneliness and wear and tear on her face. I don't mean that a physical, like she looks older than she is, or beaten up or anything. You can just see that in her manner of speaking, the way she speaks to the way she behaves and the way she just basically gives herself tries to give herself to John Grant at one point sexually, but that doesn't end up going anywhere.
Yeah,
probably due to the excessive alcohol with some.
And there's even the throwaway line where John is talking to her, and I think it's Dick or Joe, one of them, just kind of talks to the other boys who are all just getting drunk and chatting. He's like, "What? He'd rather talk with a girl than have a beer with the boys."
Yeah, that was interesting. And like that, I think that you're right. It's a fantastic observation. That one line probably gives us a hint or an insight into the kind of misogyny that kind of world she would have been dealing with. Look at very much a man's world, the Yabba, in 1970. So she would have had to put up with quite a bit.
Yeah.
And there's also insinuations that she has a sexual relationship with Doc, which is somewhat exploitative as well.
Yeah.
So she was quite a sympathetic character in a way, but I felt quite bad for her. The other one was much smaller role, a role of the receptionist at the hotel he's staying at, played by Maggie Dance. But she, again, just in the small scenes that she has, she looks so hot and bothered. You know, she has a jug of water.
Yeah,
she sticks her hand,
always just doing
weighing
this.
her head or on her chest, and just the look of relief on her face, is sort of almost, blissful expression as she sits in front of the fan, wetting her face. Is you've been here for enough summers to understand a little bit of that, I think.
Yeah. You just wait for this summer. I'll be in EB Games, just doing this, freaking everyone out.
Waking games. Let's not go there.
No.
But she, again, her just the way she delivers her lines, she's so distant, so monotonous. You can almost again see it painted on her that the exhaustion of the existence she must endure. Not the elements are only a part of it, I'm sure. And that kind of leads me to the other big star of a film. I think maybe the biggest star of a film was the Outback itself.
Oh yeah.
It's beautifully shot, this film.
Stunningly shot, absolutely gorgeous, and especially in the sort of like early parts of the kangaroo hunt, where they're just speeding through and it's just flat, just dirt and desert, and then you've got the dead trees that they're just driving through and stuff. It felt, especially with the sound of the engine of the car, it made me just think, oh fucking hell, yeah, Mad Max. This is I can tell that this is the same kind of fucking world. And it has that kind of absurdity of hyper-realism and just vacant brutality of the outback, of being out where there is nothing, no trees, no shelter, no reprieve from the baking heat. But unlike Mad Max, where it is part of the world building, they film it and they shoot it in a way that is beautiful, brutal, but also informs on how these people are and why they live the life the way that they do, because it is every day, every minute of every day is just you're being cooked. And so they have reached that point where it's, I'll do whatever I can to just feel something that isn't exhaustion and cooking. And it's gone to the point of hedonism and excess of hunting for fun rather than for food, and drinking to excess to escape it. And it's more fun to drink something that makes you feel silly rather than just drinking tepid water. It just informed on the characters really well.
The other thing that occurred to me was it's they're living literally on the edge of civilization. It makes me think of that maybe I'm going way too fucking wanky here, and I apologize to our audience for the unintended wankiness. Is that famous quote which I'm going to butcher right now, but it's like, when you stare into the abyss also stares into you. Which is kind of what I felt like they were doing there, really. And that's Nietzsche. When you gaze into that abyss, it gazes back and tells you what you were made of. So I did butcher it. I'm sorry. But the abyss is the nothingness that surrounds them in the outback. Like that has to have an impact on you.
Yeah.
I would imagine. Have you been to that part of Australia?
I have not. No, I have not gone anywhere near the center. I have not gone at all to New South Wales.
You're not missing much. It's New South Wales. I mean, it's practically underwater right now, and it's an improvement.
Wash away the unclean.
That is probably very much too soon because there is literally a flood going on there. I apologize to the literal 2 people probably who listen to us from New South Wales. You should sometime go to Broken Hill, where the Yabba is Broken Hill.
Yeah,
and it is actually filmed there, so it's on location. That's also where they shot Mad Max. Okay. I believe that's where they're shooting the next Mad Max as well. They shot the first Riddick film that way, I think, as well.
Oh yeah.
So what was that? Pitch Black. It wasn't actually a Riddick film. Riddick was a spin-off, wasn't it? But you want to make a film about the end of the world, Broken Hill's where you go.
Well, that's the line from what was that post-apocalyptic?
On the beach. It's a great place to make a film about the end of the world. But they were talking about Melbourne. And I think there was how boring it was. But apparently he didn't actually say that. It's an attributed quote. But I like to believe it. Melbourne in the 50s was a different place. But if you've been out there, you can kind of imagine, I suspect it's a bit different now because we were a lot more connected. You wouldn't feel as isolated living somewhere like Broken Hill today as you would 50 years ago or 100 years ago. You would have been on the edge of humanity and, really living on the edge of society. And probably in that part of the world working a very dangerous, exhausting job. Yeah. Enough to drive anyone to drink and gambling, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
An opening scene over the train station of Toongabba, was that the name of the town? I think Tibunda, where we have the schoolhouse on one side and the hotel on the other, and nothing else.
Yeah.
My question is, where did the kids go? Where did they come from? Like there's a school full of children at the start of a film waiting to be let go. And they take off and they say Happy Christmas and goodbye, and then 5 minutes later he walks across the road to the hotel and there's no one around. Like, where did these kids go?
Than a one-horse town.
I don't know. Like exactly, it was a lot of kids, and maybe it was a train. I don't know. It's just I'm thinking about this too much. You know what I was thinking by the end of this film, and this is going to be really put offside the critics. Is this film is basically The Hangover Australia.
Yeah.
Because he rolls back up to work at the end of the film like nothing's happened. How was your holiday? Brilliant. Yeah, see you later.
Yeah. It's and that's the part that kind of makes it that little bit more harrowing in some ways. Because everything that he went through, everything that he did, he has a nervous breakdown when he accidentally gets returned back to the Yabba when trying to escape it and get to Sydney. And then there's a conversation he has with Chips Rafferty, Jock, near the start, where Chips is saying about how people come to the Yabba and they don't really leave. And he says, well, there's, you get a couple of suicides. It's like, well, that's one way to leave the Yabba. And he goes, oh, I like that. I like a man with a good sense of humor. And then that's what he ends up fucking trying to do. Spoilers for a 50-year-old fucking movie. But he botches it up. And next thing you know, he's just healed and going back to work. And with a fresh appreciation of life. Okay, that's a really fucking bleak way of looking at that.
It is. That's what I was like. It's interesting. You just change the tone of the film a little bit, spin it a little slightly different way, and The Hangover goes from a good time, rollicking, raunchy comedy to being a harrowing descent into the third layer of hell in America's gambling capital. It could be a terrifying film. Yeah. It just depends on how you spin it. And in this case, they've chosen to spin it as a horrific nightmare in the heart of Australia. I feel like there's a way, at least in the 60s and 70s, maybe you see it, well, it doesn't happen very often anymore, but the way foreigners would shoot Australia, in this case, it's directed by a Canadian. And the main stars are British. In Donald Pleasance and Gary Bond are both British. But I felt like this story could only be told by a foreigner. Apparently, one of the reasons it didn't succeed initially is because Australians didn't like being seen as this. But this is what Australia looked like to these people who were coming from overseas.
And it's an interesting observation that you have there, because if you had an Australian person being stranded in the Yabba, being surrounded by all these Australians who are all genuinely really nice, just extremely fucking weird and drunk and brutal in many ways, it doesn't seem so like, well, what's so bad about that? He's just offering him a beer. Whereas for an Englishman, I felt really awkward and uncomfortable with the idea. So like, oh no, I said no the first time, so stop asking, stop forcing. Fuck. Okay, it becomes a labor to just say yes, and he's just having to say yes all the fucking time, and then he's put in a position where he has no choice but to say yes and sponge off of people. And it's like, oh fuck, this is just so cringeworthy, uncomfortable, but it was brilliant.
I just found the sense of menace beneath that politeness very comforting. I mean, again, I'm an Australian, so you know some of the unspoken social norms here. But if someone offers you a beer, you're probably better to say yes, as long as you can see it being poured and they don't roofie you. But it's still at the same time, what I thought they pulled off brilliantly here was that quiet, menacing, unspoken danger and menace, but we don't actually really know why. No one beats the shit out of him. No one attacks him. No one robs him. No one tries to kill him. No one's trying to hunt him down in a car. You know, the Lord Humongous doesn't make an appearance. You know, it's just people genuinely being polite. But even the conversation with Jock at the start, where Jock's showing him around and buying him a drink and telling him where to have dinner.
Of that, just the fact that so like every time Jock just drains his drink and then just looks as if, why aren't you draining yours? It's a weird sense of familiar alienation.
Interestingly, Chip Rafferty, who filmed those scenes, was insisted on drinking real pints of beer during the bar sequences. The director substituted non-alcoholic beers for the real stuff, but Rafferty could tell immediately that it had no alcoholic content and demanded proper pints be served. He told Kotcheff, "You concentrate on the directing, I'll concentrate on the drinking." Greater words have never been spoken by another Australian. The director calculated that due to this, Rafferty was drinking up to 30 pints per day. You know, I don't use the word hero very often on this show, but Jesus Christ, 30 pints a day, I'd be dead.
Fuck.
I mean, so take that into account as well. He was probably smashed when he filmed those scenes. Maybe that's why they're so fucking weird.
Yeah.
In that there's like, but there's something about them aside from it. Like maybe it's just a pause between answering a question or saying something, but how he says something. There's some incredible menace behind the way everybody speaks or regards Gary Bond in this town. And it's really impossible to say why. Yeah, it's there and it's unspoken, and it's chilling. This is a horror. This is a horror film in which no one dies. Yeah, that's it, and it's a road movie where no one goes anywhere.
Yeah, it's the most brutal movie without, aside from the kangaroo hunt, any real brutality. And that is where it's kind of persistently balancing on that. It is this, but it's not. It is, but it's not. Every single step of the way, it's kind of presenting one way and feeling another. that's why you have to give it a full attention, because otherwise you're lost.
I'll agree with you. Your overall synopsis. This is not an easy film to watch. Is the correct one, I think, and should be taken into account by anybody who's planning to watch it themselves. Give yourself some mental space.
Yeah,
literally, I'm serious. Like, give yourself some headspace before and after. This is not one to go, hey, look, it's Wake in Fright. We're having a movie night, Netflix and chill. Let's watch Wake in Fright. No, this is not that kind of film.
That's a weird Netflix and chill session. That really,
especially considering it's not on Netflix, but yeah, you know what I mean. It's well worth a look if you're interested in exploitation. Like we said, highly regarded by some very well-known filmmakers. If you're interested in Australian cinema, I think if you're just interested in good cinema and being discomforted by something.
And I will say there was a 2017 two-part TV remake of this, which does not look like it was anywhere near as brutal or as successful, shall we say. So
I feel like it was reasonably well regarded. I don't recall. It's got a reasonable rating, but you know, see the original.
Yeah.
See the original if you can. Anyway, thank you for indulging me in that one. I think that's an interesting choice, even if I do say so myself.
I think that while it was really hard for me to watch, and while I can't say that I particularly enjoy it, I like the fact that I can now say that I have seen this, and I am better for watching it because I think it is an important movie. And certainly it is fantastic that it did not get lost into time.
It's the kind of film that we do well in Australia, you know.
Yeah.
Survive in the Outback. We've seen, this is the anti-Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah.
You could probably put this more in line with something like Wolf Creek.
Yeah. Yeah.
But not a slasher film.
No. Now, I have the keys.
You do.
And I am going further back in time. But I'm going to one with more easy outs than you gave me with this one. But we are following Chips Rafferty. And we are going to go to 1962. Mutiny on the Bounty.
Well, an Australian connection of his film as well.
Exactly. And this is the one with Marlon Brando, Trevor Howard, Richard Harris, Hugh Griffith. It's one of the kind of legendary movies from the 60s. And it's one that I've never seen.
I don't believe I've ever seen as well. This has got this is not the version with the Australian actor in it from Tasmania, whose name escaped me right now. Oh my god, I had my Australia card pulled for this one.
Unbelievable. Paul Hogan.
Mel Gibson was in one, of course.
Oh yes, yes.
But I believe it was. Yeah. Anyway, this has been made into a film many times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is the Marlon Brando version.
Yes.
Not the Mel Gibson version. So I'm very curious to get a look at it.
So it is available on Apple TV. And I am genuinely looking forward to this one because this, going back to a movie set at sea in the 60s, there was a period where that was a very popular thing for Hollywood to create. And this was almost much like in modern cinema now. It's like, oh, if you want Oscar movie, you make a biopic of someone who recently died or a famous person who's coming towards the end of their life or something like that. This kind of thing, the epic at sea kind of thing, this was Hollywood's elite sort of thing. So I really want to see this. And it's got a young Marlon Brando in it. And there's a reason why he was a legend in Hollywood. And Richard Harris as well. Mwah! Looking forward to it. So you have got plenty of places that you can go.
Island Dr. Moreau is calling. I think we did watch that already. Didn't you watch that?
We did. We watched that for G&T podcast, I think it was.
Yeah. By the way, the actor I was thinking of was Errol Flynn.
Oh. Was that the 40s version?
I thought he was in a version of Mutiny in the Bounty, but let me look into that. It was a film called Captain Blood. Anyway, Errol Flynn he's from Tassie. Was the one I was thinking of, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he wasn't in a Mutiny in the Bounty film, but I can't see one. So anyway,
Errol Flynn was definitely in a bunch of kind of sea-based movies. Like he was one of the actors that made the famous kind of putting the knife in the sails and sliding down. No pirate in their right mind would do that to their ship.
He was in a film called Captain Blood in 1935. So maybe that's the one I'm thinking of as opposed to a Mutiny in the Bounty type film. But exciting choice.
Yeah. Okay. So where should we go now? Do you want to do the Trek perspective before we go to the next part of the show? Because I feel like both of us haven't had much chance to actually watch too much.
It's going to be a slightly shorter film this week. I'm so tired. Shorter show this week. You're right, and remarkably, it's a shorter Trek perspective this week as well. It's to keep you, not even get you in and out of here on time this time, people.
Goodness me, ladies and gentlemen, we started a little bit late, but we're still on time out the door. Come on. That's the life.
We do try to deliver, but yes, we can go for Trek perspective next.
Okay.
Let me just get things ready here, and we will.
Trek perspective.
Play us out, Sammy.
Ready to go?
Ready to go. Episode 5 of a Trek perspective, where we continue Michelle's deep dive down the Rote Warren, aka Hell's Gate, that is the Star Trek film universe. For those who don't know, Michelle had never seen Star Trek before she lost a bet. Now she's watching all of them, and she's gonna tell us what she thinks. This week we had the distinct pleasure of watching Star Trek V: The Final Frontier. For those uninitiated, when the newly christened Starship Enterprise's shakedown cruise goes poorly, Captain Kirk and crew put her into space dock for repairs, but an urgent mission interrupts their earthbound shore leave. A renegade Vulcan named Cybok has taken 3 ambassadors hostage on Nimbus 3, the planet of galactic peace. This event also attracts the attention of a Klingon captain who wants to make a name for himself and sets out to pursue the Enterprise. Cybok's ragtag army captures the Enterprise and takes her on a journey to the center of the galaxy in search of a supreme being. This is written and directed by William Shatner. He's also widely acknowledged as being the worst Star Trek film ever made. At least I think it is. I can't actually say that's what the results are. Michelle, what did you make of it?
Can I just say, I absolutely loved this film. I thought it was fantastic. It was brilliant. I just thought it just needed just more of it. I wanted to see more. And I'm so happy that I've lost this bet and that I can watch all these films.
You're taking your first step into a larger universe. This synopsis does not square with what I heard while you were watching it.
Can I just say, I watched the trailer to remind me of what I saw, and the trailer was brilliant. 2.5 minutes, I'm like, yeah, I'll watch 2.5 minutes of this. Oh, Lordy Lord, that film was just... There was not enough clinkers in the world, is all I can say.
Those uninitiated, clinkers are a brand or a variety of Australian candy. Michelle,
they're a traffic light signal, and you bite into it, and inside they're either pink, yellow, or green. I get very excited when I bite in and I get the pink. I'm like, yes. The yellow, I can deal. The green is something to suffer through. So this is just all green clinkers.
I was going to say, this is the green clinkers of Star Trek films. This is the one I was going to maybe let you skip, but I decided I think we should just, for completionist's sake, go there. Were there any redeeming characteristics for you?
The fact that I got to see all these other movies there, like for example, like it's like Star Trek went to Tatooine / Mad Max set. So it's kind of like, wait, is this still Star Trek? What didn't they go to Yosemite or Yosemite, as I like to call it?
I don't say sabotage. I say sabotage. Yosemite. You're going to say Yosemite people. Next time you see Yosemite, and if someone corrects you, just ask them. That's not how you pronounce it.
I'm just
how do
going
you
to
pronounce
go with Mikrave. So if what's her name can get away with that, I can get away with
Yeah, the British person.
British cooking person.
Whose name escapes me at this moment in time. There was a scene shot in Yosemite. Fairly, I take it from your raucous laughter, you found it somewhat unconvincing.
Special effects. There even is, I think there's a couple of quippy lines. Like, I know this ship like the back of my hand, and he bumps into it. Look, again, it's an episode being stretched into a film. And there was so much. I actually kind of liked the ideas that potentially it was going to deal with, which is God and fanaticism, and how people start to follow a belief without actually verifying it, and how we label things that we don't understand or we don't have any information on. I mean, super interesting stuff. And yet, no, absolutely does not deal with it. And also they had to have Spock be related to the fanatic. And I'm like, is this a reference to Star Wars again? Maybe I'm just seeing this through the wrong lens. Let me just say that the highlight of the film was when Rocky punched the Russian. So, you know.
We finally got around to Rocky IV palate cleanser after this, which is what Michelle's referring to. And it was actually a real joy to watch a film with it, like an incredibly light on story. Rocky IV has a pathetically light story. It's basically an
example of something that could be summarized in a sentence, much like Star Trek, and yet
it's well, I think maybe Star Trek was aiming a little higher to tell a story about God and failed miserably, whereas Rocky was trying to tell a story about a boxing match between the Americans and the Russians.
Didn't Rocky really also try and tell a story about God too? Come on.
I would enjoy the opportunity to try and figure that out, but I'd need some study time to try and put those puzzle pieces together. I have nothing good to say about this film. As I said, it's the most reviled Star Trek film, I think, of at least of the original 6. Maybe one of the next gen films might have had, someone might have an argument about Nemesis being as bad as this. If you really don't like the Abrams films, some people might say them. I just think this is borderline unwatchable. My personal favorite, the worst scene in the film, was the dance by Uhura, which again I believe caused you to collapse into raucous laughter at the sight of her doing an exotic dance to distract people.
Yes, and of course there was a couple of Captain's Log, which I just went, yeah, that's the stuff.
So I think it was more in line with what we've been promising to do in terms of this is a pretty short one. So,
well, what's there to say other than it exists? It exists.
that happened, in other words.
That happened. We watched it. We aged while we watched it, and then we saw Rocky.
Time we're not getting our lives back. We should sue William Shatner for that. Out of 10 how many lockdowns out of 10 do you think this is qualifies for? Is this a perfect score?
This is 8 lockdowns.
8 lockdowns. So we're back to a 2. I think we revised last week. We revised motion picture back down to 1 out of 10.
No. What do you mean we revised motion picture?
I think you decided you had no frame of reference, so you thought maybe you've been a little overly generous.
Yeah, the first one was quite bad, and it went down. No, I actually. Yeah, no, okay, no, still 1 out of 10 for the first one, because I had no, and I was trying to be generous, but my generosity is faltering, much like the Enterprise.
This is the 3rd time in 5 films the Enterprise has been hijacked. We've figured out, and that's probably not really including the first one where it was kind of hijacked. So they're kind of doing the same thing over again. They're going to really notice that in these films, that they really are not extending their story range very much.
No, I tell you what these people are doing. They're paying off their mortgages, is what they're doing with these films.
They were doing that, and how there was one more original cast film to come.
Mm-hmm. And then, so what are we down? 5 down.
8 to go.
Oh.
You've never been closer to finishing before now. I think you've got the worst. I think you've got the worst out of the way, frankly. I think you'll find that they're not anywhere near as distasteful to you as they.
Are we getting 90s grunge now? Star Trek, is that what's happening
Star
now?
Trek 6, I think, is 1991. So we are moving our way into the 90s, which is hopefully. I think 6 is pretty good. It's got a 7.2 on IMDb, a 65 Metascore.
Can I just say, I challenge your reliance on IMDb scores and Rotten Tomatoes because no.
I think it's indicative.
No.
I mean, it's had Star Trek 5
Indicative
had a
of
5.
what?
Star Trek 5 at a 5.5, so it's a good 1.7 points higher at a 43 Metascore. Fairly indicative if people didn't like it. But I mean, you didn't like Star Trek 4, and that had a good score. So, for you, it may mean nothing.
And this is why, non-compulsory voting fails. This is exactly what.
I'll say this for the next film. Leonard Nimoy wrote it.
Okay.
And he wrote Star Trek 3, which has been your favorite so far.
Yes, the Return of Spock. There might be some emotion in this one.
So this one's more of a straight ahead Cold War story. So this is very much the Rocky IV of Star Trek films.
The Rocky IV. Well, I'm looking forward to a montage then.
So anyway, we have a 2 out of 10 for Star Trek 5. Michelle adds. She continues. She survives. We had to get her a shirt.
Rocky. We'll
have to get her a shirt that says Star Trek Survivor or something like that at the end of this, because she's been a real trooper. Thank you again for joining us, Michelle, on the Trek Perspective.
Pleasure to do so. Not really.
And back to you, Spearsy.
I think that may have been review.
Sorry, your favorite?
Yes, I think so. Starting with the little help me sign, fantastic.
Props always help.
And then just casually just changing the subject to Rocky IV.
And clinkers. We had a conversation about clinkers.
You just never know what you're going to get with the Trek Perspective, honestly.
She's a wild card, Michelle. As being a complete outsider of the Trek world. Mm-hmm. I think I'm very, very curious to see if her opinions of the films pick up as we get into the more new ones. I've noticed that watching these, I haven't seen the originals for a long time. I think I said that last week. I haven't seen 5. Fuck God, no. Why would you go back and watch 5? It's terrible. But they look dated. They look really badly dated now.
Yeah.
And Michelle constantly points out, hey, this is made after Star Wars. Star Wars looks so much better than this. Mm-hmm. And I think from memory, a lot of the special effects were done by ILM as well.
Yeah.
For Star Trek. I don't know what it is. They're just more ambitious than what that George Lucas was doing, but they look significantly worse than a lot of the films going around at the time. So, for example, that film, Star Trek 5, had a $25 million budget, I think, from memory. On Friday night last week, I went to the cinema. We can call this a review if we like. I went to the cinema to see Cinema Fiasco. Those who don't live in Melbourne, Cinema Fiasco is a regular cinema comedy event that happens from time to time, where they'll show a really bad film and there'll be 2 comedians in the audience with microphones talking throughout the film and basically taking the piss. And last week we saw Life Force. Have you ever seen Life Force?
I don't think so, but the name rings a bell.
It was directed by Toby Hooper in 1985 in Britain. And it is based on a book called The Space Vampires. A race of space vampires arrive in London, infect the populace, beginning an apocalyptic descent into chaos. And interesting, the reason why I mention it is this film also had a $25 million budget. It was made, I think, 2 or 3 years before Star Trek 5. Probably the most interesting casting aspect to the film is it stars Patrick Stewart in one of his very early film roles and features his first on-screen kiss. And the first he kiss is with Steve Railsback, the star of the film. So Patrick Stewart was breaking down barriers. I don't want to go into too much detail about this film. This film sucks. There's a reason why the whole film is about taking the piss out of it. The antagonist is Space Girl, played by Matilda May, who is naked through almost the entirety of the film.
Wow.
There is an extraordinary amount of full frontal female nudity. Apparently, you weren't allowed to have frontal male nudity at the time in Britain. So,
because the penis is just not as attractive as the vagina.
So is that the official British censorship perspective, was it?
Yes, that is what the BBFC would state.
I'm sure they would have said something like that. For the general, I just encourage you to have a look at some of the stills on IMDb of the vampires. That they get their life force sucked. They don't suck blood. The space vampires suck the life force out of people, and they turn into like husks. And there's these really hilarious looking puppets that they built for the film. And
Oh dear.
The film was written by Dan O'Bannon, who wrote the original Alien film.
Yeah.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he wrote The Warriors as well.
Yes.
Maybe not. I could be wrong. But anyway, he's a well-known, definitely wrote he's credited as the writer of the original Alien.
Dark Star, Return of the Living Dead.
No, he didn't do Warriors. My bad. But apparently he wrote a screenplay for Total Recall, the good one.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Everyone has a bad day, I guess.
Yeah. Yep.
But anyway, what the thing was...
Yeah.
Aside from the stupid vampire puppets and the naked space girl...
Yeah.
And just about everything else that happens in the film, it looked better than Star Trek V.
Wow.
You know, and it's garbage, you know.
You've got to kind of wonder. I mean, for the difference of where that money is going, though, it's like you've got to think at that point, Shatner was probably demanding a lot, and Leonard Nimoy was probably demanding a lot, and so most of that budget was probably on the cast themselves, rather than. So like, oh yes, we're going to have better special effects and get relative unknown people.
I mean, I'm not saying the special effects were good in Life
But
Force.
they were better.
They were somehow more convincing and not as laughably awful. A lot of them weren't as laughably awful as they are in Star Trek 5. I mean, I know there's the opening sequence to First Contact, where they're zooming in on Jean-Luc's eye from out in space and onto his. That's what they wanted to do at the start of this film, but they didn't have a technology. So I got to give it. I guess they just couldn't. Maybe their eyes were bigger than their stomach. They wanted to do things that they just didn't have the technology or budget to do at the time. But Jesus Christ, I'm very curious. Once we get into the Abrams films, is your opinion going to turn around? Like, at least the first two Abrams films were pretty. These films, Star Trek films, I feel like really were made for people who watch the TV show mainly. Like,
yeah,
Michelle's right.
Even from kind of the what's the last one of the original guys called? What's the one you're watching next week?
Star Trek 6: The Quest for Peace. The Undiscovered Country.
Undiscovered Country, yeah. That one, you were right when you were talking to Michelle about that feeling more like a Cold War movie. I feel like going back to those movies, that is when they started more writing them as films rather than extensions of a TV show.
She is right. They are the ones that they do feel like these things would have been stuff they would have made an episode about, and maybe a 2-part episode.
Yeah,
but they don't support a feature film.
Yeah,
especially it's not this one. There were some interesting ideas in 5, believe it or not. Watching it again, you're like, there's some interesting ideas they could have played with here. But again, a bit like Star Trek: The Motion Picture, it takes 40 fucking minutes to get to the interesting ideas, even yet mentioned. Shatner has never directed a feature film again, as far as I know. That's a good thing.
Probably.
He's not a great. But I'll move off Cinema Fiasco quickly, if it's okay.
Yes.
And talk a little about the palate cleanser this week.
Yes.
Finally got around to watching Rocky IV.
Rocky 4.
The Quest for Peace.
The Quest. And that is strangely kind of fitting.
No, Quest for Peace is Superman 4. Rocky Balboa proudly holds the World Heavyweight Boxing Championship, but a new challenger has stepped forward. Drago, a 6'4", 261-pound fighter who has the backing of the Soviet Union.
I will break you.
I must break you. If he dies, he dies. Of course, Drago is played iconically by the great Dolph Lundgren. When they say pounds, I'm like, how many? What is 261 pounds? Like, it says 118 kilos. I don't know. I don't know anything about boxing. I guess that's quite heavy, but
118 kilos. That's 1.5 of me.
Yeah, I assume. I don't know if that's actually what Lundgren weighed at the time, but he is huge in this film.
Yeah,
and he stands quite a bit over Stallone. And there's a famous story that Stallone actually asked him to hit him for real in some of the scenes to make it look good.
Yeah,
and end up like breaking his heart or something. Almost, he hit him so hard. As Stallone decided for shooting, he wanted to do it. After 3 takes of hitting Rocky, taking shots to the ribs, Stallone felt a burning in his chest, but ignored it. Later that night, he had difficulty breathing and was taken to a nearby emergency room. It was discovered that his blood pressure was over 200, and he had to be flown on a low-altitude flight from Canada to St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica, where he remained in intensive care for 4 days. What had happened was that Lundgren had punched him so hard in the chest, Stallone's heart had slammed up against his breastbone and began to swell, cutting off a blood supply and restricting the oxygen flow through the body. So at least that's rumored to have happened. At least so. He was a big dude. He had worked as a bouncer, I think, in Australia. I assume people know this, but he has like a master's degree in chemical engineering or something from the University of Sydney, Dolph Lundgren. So he's not a fucking idiot. He's actually he's Swedish, but I was telling Michelle, she was like, he's just a big, big tough guy. I'm like, he's actually pretty smart. He's you don't just hand out master's degrees.
That's actually even a throwaway line in the first Expendables movie.
And he had a Fulbright scholarship to MIT in Boston, one of the world's top engineering schools. So again, I know a little bit about those sorts of things. And again, they don't just hand them out to anyone.
No.
So it's an interesting aspect to the guy.
Yeah.
But he is kind of perfect for Drago in a sense. I don't know that he has a great deal of range for an actor.
No.
But a little bit like we talked a few years ago with Wonder Woman and Gal Gadot, when you just get an actor and you just give them something that's completely within their range to do and don't ask them to step outside of that. A little bit like when I asked Gal Gadot to do acting in the Kenneth Branagh Murder on the Nile. No, she can't act. You don't need her to act. She can stand there and look statuesque. That's really her skill set.
Yep.
This is what he does. This is like when Schwarzenegger was asked to do Terminator. He hadn't really had any range at that point. He just had to stand there and look scary and act like a robot. Perfect. What he's born for. This is the role that Drago was born for.
Yeah.
What I did notice watching this again, and it was interesting watching it with Michelle, who hadn't seen it since the 80s, was how little story there is to this. I was sort of trying to hint at this in the Trek Respective this week. There's not much to this film at all. It's very slight.
Yeah.
It's an hour and 31 minutes. I would hazard a guess 15 to 20 minutes of that is footage from previous films.
Yeah.
Or throwbacks.
Yeah.
There are at least 3 montages in this film.
I need a montage.
Okay, you can't take it that seriously without thinking of that song. Always fade out in the montage, there's the famous training sequence, of course. I think it's been big Family Guy took the piss out of it and stuff like that. Yeah, there's at least 2 other montages in the film, and you're like, oh wow, like how many montages is too many, even for a Rocky film?
There is never too many.
I don't know. So you take the montages. Then we add in the fact that the first 5 minutes is just clips from the last film. Then we show other clips later on of, their friendship between Rocky and Apollo Creed, who, of course, famously is killed in the ring by by Drago.
Yeah.
Though and Rocky should have thrown in the towel,
Yeah.
It's probably an hour of actual film story, and that's kind of like I think it's a very basic 3-act film. There's
Mhm.
the setup, there's the fight with Apollo Creed, then there's the training in the middle, and then there's the fight with Drago, and somehow it works.
Yeah.
Like
Keep the story simple.
it's incredible. It's written and directed by Stallone.
Mm-hmm.
People forget he won an Academy Award for the first one.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It has a 6.8 audience score. It has a 40 Metascore. So obviously the critics didn't like it when it came out, but it's endured. It's like, I mean, apart from the original Rocky, this is the other one like that has stuck around in people's memories as one of it. And Drago is probably the most up there with Apollo Creed as the most memorable non-Rocky character. I mean, maybe Adrian, I suppose, but like he's become an iconic character in years.
I can't believe that you didn't mention Thunderlips.
Thunderlips, Hulk Hogan.
Don't say his name in the reality. If you say it too many times, he appears.
Oh, good Lord, and he says something racist.
Yes. That's a hint for what I've been watching.
Sorry?
I said that's a hint for what I've been watching.
Hemsworth is going to play Hogan in the film.
Yeah, interesting.
That's going to be interesting. I was reading about the next Star Trek film, and apparently at one point Hemsworth had turned it down because he found his script underwhelming. That's Chris, by the way. But not the discount Hemsworths. You guys go, he found the script so underwhelming he didn't want to do it. But Spiderhead, that's a good script. I want to do that one. How bad must that Star Trek script have been?
I think the difference is maybe he had an opportunity to get his name on as a producer.
I am certain he would have got on as a producer if he wanted to do a Trek film.
No, yeah, maybe.
I mean, like, he's kind of pretty big star now, but anyway.
Don't know what you're talking about. He hasn't got a new movie that's just released? No.
It's so much fun, this movie. I don't understand why. It doesn't make any sense. It's actually a very lazy and brief film, but it was actually a really nice palate cleanser compared to Star Trek V. Like I said, they were trying to do something really big and intellectual with Star Trek V, and they failed miserably. Whereas, Stallone here aimed at a target 1 meter high and hit it square in the middle, and it was a lot of fun.
Yep.
So if you haven't seen Rocky IV lately, it's always worth going back and have another look at it. It's eminently quotable. It's a lot of fun. It's super cheesy. And it's got lots of those rock songs that Rocky is famous for, and the training montage, one of the great training montages. And Michelle was watching this. At one point, he climbs a mountain in Siberia, and she's like, "Oh, is he going to do the arm thing? Is he going to do the arm thing? Yay!" Drago! It's so much fun. I mean, like, and it's just fascinating that they made this one, and the next one was absolute trash.
Again, that, like you were saying about having interesting ideas in the last Star Trek. It's an interesting concept that they have for Rocky V, but it's just not well done.
It's bad. Rocky V is bad. I mean, we're not doing a series on Rocky just yet. No. We've got some ideas on what we might do after a retrospective, but the Rocky series won't be it, unfortunately. But it was nice to get a nice juicy piece of 80s cheese just to wash that taste away of the 80s crud. But William Shatner gave us in Star Trek V.
Nicely done. All right, now I had forgotten that a couple of weeks ago I watched a new movie, and I hinted at it because I said if you say the name a few times, he appears. I watched the Jordan Peele produced 2021 Candyman.
This came in with a lot of hype, and then it disappeared quickly. What did you make of it?
There's a reason. It's not good. Is the reason why it came and went. It is vapid. It is quite well produced overall. Like, it looks quite good, but there is no... Jordan Peele has come out of a comedy background, largely known for, to deliver some of the best chilling, horrific, and intelligently created movies of the last, 10 years at this point? And there is none of that here. So for those who don't know, this is a sequel to the horror film series Candyman, which started in 1992. And it returns to the now gentrified Chicago neighborhood where the legend began. In present day, many years after the last of Cabrini Towers was torn down, Anthony and his partner move into a loft in the now gentrified Cabrini. A chance encounter with an old-timer exposes Anthony to the true story behind Candyman. Anxious to use these macabre details in his studio as fresh, grist-for paintings, because he's a painter, he unknowingly opens a door to a complex past that unravels his own sanity and unleashes a terrifying wave of violence. And that makes it sound more interesting than it is. The idea of revisiting somewhere that has been gentrified is interesting because there is so much about those environments, and because of the genesis of the Candyman, if you are aware of the Candyman series, is quite interesting. And there is a lot of social context in there, like so many of the classic horror movies. Think of the George A. Romero zombie movies and how they tackle race and
the second one's big about consumerism and that kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. And they what Marvel is doing now with their superhero movies of dressing them up as one thing and delivering something else, that's kind of what made a lot of these horror movies so good. And so the idea of kind of digging up a painted over whitewashing of history kind of thing is an interesting concept, but they don't do enough with it. And the fact that I am gonna definitely butcher his name, and I really apologize. Yahya Abdul Mateen II, who plays Anthony McCoy, he's an artist who is kind of almost like chasing likes and chasing success at any cost. And it kind of cheats the idea of it and that use of society to deliver more. And even when they start to try and talk about the fame that he starts getting because of the artwork that he creates, as his mind and his world starts to change and he learns more about the Candyman and the legend behind it, even then it doesn't go anywhere particularly interesting, and it's only just a boring sprinkle on the top of just emptiness beneath. There's elements of sort of like racial profiling and sort of like corrupt cops still being in the Cabrini Towers area, which again would be interesting and would be compelling, especially if that is something that still persists in this gentrified area when everything else has been the history has been forcibly removed or purposefully forgotten. But again, it just ends up being this lackadaisical story that doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't develop anything. You don't get any emotional investment in any of the characters, and you don't really feel any threat because you're being shown, oh, this happened because of this. And like, well, yeah, he was fucked over and he went on a killing spree. I feel more sympathy for the killer than I do for everyone else who died because they were cunts. And none of the characters are particularly redeeming. They're all self-serving, and it's just really, really disappointing. Now, the director is Nia DaCosta, and this one was someone, she is directing the new Marvels movie coming out next year, apparently. And I'm curious as to why she got that particular job, because Candyman, this movie, is not big on special effects. It's not big on action. And that makes me worried about what the Marvels movie is going to be, because it's a trend that we've seen with some of the more recent Marvel movies of them trying to tick social justice boxes without actually doing what a movie's supposed to do, of telling an interesting, entertaining, or purposefully confronting story, such as Wake in Fright. And so we're going to see a very boring movie come forward.
Wasn't me boring anyway, right? Like, come on.
Yeah, it's a sequel to Captain Marvel. There you go.
Captain Marvel. I mean, I don't know. I haven't got around to watching Miss Marvel yet, but you didn't give it a glowing review.
No.
And I assume it's got what's her face, WandaVision in it. What's her name? Monica Rambeau.
I would presume so. There's not much that seems to be known about it at this point.
I mean, I guess I would argue it doesn't matter who directs a Marvel film now. I mean, they went out, they got Sam Raimi, one of the greatest comic book and horror directors of all time, making a comic book horror film hybrid,
and
then said, just make me a Marvel film.
Yeah.
That looked like pretty much any other Marvel film you've ever seen, except it had Bruce Campbell in it punching himself in the face.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, why bother? Why bother getting Sam Raimi? Get some kid out of school who can, who can competently shoot, and then get the guy. I mean, remember there was a story about Kate Shortland, who did Black Widow, and someone else who passed on the film before Kate Shortland was hired. I mean, Kate Shortland does art house Australian films.
Yeah,
never done anything like Marvel before. But you're right; she ticked the box. They wanted a woman to direct it, which is fine. Sure, they were probably. I mean, you wanted a female action director. Catherine Bigelow is one of the best in the world.
But she has her own style, which doesn't fit the Marvel template.
Why would you do that? Because she's probably not going to do it because you want to do it her way, and she's probably a lot more expensive than Kate. But someone else who was a previous choice to go in line to direct that film said she passed because she was told she wouldn't have to worry about directing the action sequences. Someone else would do that. Yeah,
that's true.
Now, I don't know if that actually happened. That was a story that was reported. So I guess with the Marvels, it doesn't really matter who near the cost of direction or somebody else, because it'll just make it look like every other Marvel film. But interestingly, the least Marvel film I think we've seen come out of Marvel in the last 5 years was probably The Eternals by Chloe Zhao.
Yeah.
But she's an Academy Award winning director. I have a feeling she might get a little bit more leeway to make films her way. And despite the fact it didn't look like your standard Marvel film, that didn't make it good. Anyway, I don't want to get into Marvel talk, but I think I can see your point that they're looking to hire people because of who they are, not because of what they've done. Yeah, and it's not to say she can't work or she can't direct. She obviously can, but there was once upon a time where you were hired on your basis of what you could do.
So here's an interesting concept. Here's an interesting director. Let's see what they do together. But no.
Let me play devil's advocate again for 1 second. If Michelle were here, she'd probably point out to me that Robert Zemeckis made some. I think the first 2 or 3 films he made were complete and utter flops. And then he got given Back to the Future.
Yep.
So,
it's fair.
It's probably maybe it's not as new as we think it is.
I will say, on Robert Zemeckis, he's gone back to making crap. And he's doing the next fucking Disney Plus movie of Pinocchio again with Tom fucking Hanks. It's like, what is the? It might not. We're talking about Candyman.
Did you like the original Candyman, or have you seen the original?
I have only seen the first one, and I liked it. I found it scary. I found it was bloody. It was your quintessential early 90s horror movie. It wasn't as brutal and horrific as something like Nightmare on Elm Street, or as suspenseful as Halloween, or the Michael Myers Jason Voorhees. What ones?
No, Friday the 13th films.
Right, yeah, thank you. There you go. They had a certain element to them that made them chilling. But it was the first horror movie that I chose to watch that my brother did not tell me this is a good one to watch. So it's got that nostalgia factor. It was my first horror movie that I picked, and the idea I remember. So all the kids in my school after it came out, everyone, you couldn't go into the bathroom without hearing someone going Candyman in front of a mirror, because there was just a simple myth and that kind of touch of magic to the character that just kind of captured the young person's imagination. This just doesn't have it, because everyone's a fucking 28 to 35-year-old jaded person who somehow, even though he's a moderately successful artist, it's the Friends syndrome. No actor in Joey Tribbiani's lifestyle is going to be able to afford an apartment where he has and live the life that he lives. And Phoebe Buffay having this actually seems very comfortable life, and everyone seems to oh, don't worry about where their money comes from, just imagine the fantasy, it's fine. But it's just unlike in Friends or Sex and the City, like you watched last week, where it doesn't matter and it's kind of like that escapism. These guys are narcissists and just not nice people. So I don't want to be like these dickheads. Fuck you. So there's no one to be your gateway into this. And the fact that it firmly plants itself as a sequel to realistically only one good movie in the franchise from 20 years ago.
How many were there originally? I only know the original.
3, I think.
Oh, okay. I guess if I saw Candyman back in the day, my friend George and I, the other George, not you, we go and watch. I go into his house. He lived literally around the corner from me, and we would watch horror films. And we watched the entire Friday the 13th series, and then I would sprint home just in case. But I remember seeing Candyman the original and being deeply unimpressed by it, and then just being kind of really surprised when this film came out, finding out that the original was so fondly remembered by so many people. Going, man, I thought it sucked, but I'm wrong.
There's 3 original plus this one.
I assume this ignores the second and third one.
Well, I haven't seen the other 2, so I do not know. I'm mildly curious to go back and watch Candyman Farewell to the Flesh, because it is directed by Bill Condon, who has had somewhat of a resurgence in the last few years. He directed the generally critically approved Gods and Monsters. He did Kinsey, Dreamgirls, Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 1 and Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 2. But he's come back into the public eye. So I'm curious to see what he would have done. But at the same time, I don't really have any interest in going back and filling my bingo card of Candyman movies. This was just so disappointing, so woefully disappointing, because not only did Jordan Peele produce this, he helped screenwrite it. And I think those, just based off of the level of intelligence that he has brought into all of his movies, which he's also been the writer for, those interesting nuggets of ideas like the gentrification of the area and the attempt at bringing a new kind of social commentary into it. I think that's where he came from. And I have a feeling that he didn't really do a screenplay, more general outline. Here you go, hand it off. I've got to go and produce and make a movie over here. So
I saw a lot of comments on the user reviews on IMDb here. A lot of people who are complaining and don't like this film, don't like it because of her politics.
Interesting.
I don't know what they're expecting. Did
Yeah.
you see? Did you see Get Out? I mean,
Yeah.
a little bit of a political subtext there. You might have missed that.
Just a touch. Just a touch. I think that they could have got so much fucking harder with all of the political social commentary that is in this movie, and it would have made this movie so much more interesting. But yeah, it's woefully disappointing. It is not a good horror movie. It is not a good social commentary movie. It is vapid. It is disappointing.
Thumbs down from you.
Yeah, that's yeah. Just a touch.
Can I take it off a negative note and talk about something a little lighter?
Yes, you can.
So I watched a film on Disney Plus that I found. One of the things I like to do occasionally is I'll type in most overlooked films of the year so far. In most years, you get a lot of results. In the last couple of years, it's been rough because, well, geez, there hasn't been a whole lot of stuff made. But one of the films that came up late last year, early this year, in that search was a film called Plan B. And that is now viewable on Disney Plus. Which I assume it's a Hulu film, so I guess that's why. It is not the kind of film you would usually associate with Disney.
Okay.
Follows a straight-laced high school student and her slacker best friend who, after a regrettable first sexual encounter, have 24 hours to hunt down a Plan B pill in America's heartland.
Yep, that's definitely not what you'd expect on Disney.
And I thought it was an interesting film to check out this week, given what's been happening in that country in the last has happened in the last couple of weeks in that country with their Supreme Court rulings of Roe v. Wade being overturned. Interestingly, this film was made in 2021, so before that really started to become, I guess we knew in May that this was going to happen. So this film was well before that, but the film clicks in very nicely to that narrative. So our main characters, Sunny, who is of South Asian descent. I guess we would say probably Indian, I'm guessing. Indian, yes, I think I'd safe to say Indian. And Hispanic or Latinx, if you like that term. I know a lot of people don't, whatever. But they are, I guess that's a heritage, but they are both American. So I guess they are both first generation. It's insinuated they're both first generation Americans. Sunny is the stereotypical, good girl, straight-laced character who has excellent grades. Her mother is portrayed as being very, putting a lot of pressure on her to get good grades. You've got to B+ on this. But to explain what you did wrong, I'm not putting it. Okay, I shouldn't do the accent, but that's genuinely the accent she has.
It kind of came off Russian.
I do not do accents well. I do the Australian accent well. That's about it, eh?
Yeah.
Yes, fucking A.
Yeah.
Whereas Lupe is the more free-spirited of the two. Plays up to being the more sexually experienced. Sort of, it's a fairly standard sort of chemistry, and that they are best friends at high school. And in a shockingly familiar trope, Sunny has a crush on a guy at school who seems unattainable. In an effort to try and get close to him, she organizes a party at her house while her mother, doesn't mention her father, I don't think, her mother is out of town. We've never seen this in cinema, but we are through the looking glass here, people.
Brave new world.
It's a little coming off a little American Pie here. At the party, her love interest disappears with one of the cool, pretty mean girls from school. In her, shall we say, grief, and losing her opportunity with the guy she likes, she ends up having sex with sort of a guy who is a over-the-top evangelical Christian in her bathroom. Despite using protection, it doesn't really go to plan, and protection doesn't seem to have worked. They didn't really follow the instructions on the packet, it seems. So after finding the condom inside her the day after her sexual encounter, very drunken sexual encounter, it should be noted, she freaks out, because, she's the straight-laced, straight-A, going places kid who couldn't possibly tell her mother that she had premarital sex and may be pregnant and, had a party. And her first thought of call, along with Lupe, is to go to the chemist to buy the Plan B pill. Hopefully I don't need to tell people what a Plan B pill is. If you don't know, Google it. But it's essentially, it's an abortion pill, I guess you call it that. But you got to take it within a certain period of
Americans
time.
probably would definitely call it an abortion pill.
I guess so. But, Google it, I guess, if you don't know what it is. But basically,
you swallow it, and inside your body, SEAL Team 6 just takes out any foreign invaders.
I'm going to keep going. This reboot of Fantastic Voyage has taken a very strange turn. So they go to the chemist. The chemist is played by Jay Chandrasekhar.
He's of Broken Lizard group, right?
Broken Lizard, so Super Troopers, Dukes of Hazzard, that kind of thing. And once he finds out how old she is, he says, "I choose not to sell you a pill." She's like, "You can't do that." And he goes, "Yes, in this state, we have a conscience clause, and to have a clear conscience, I choose not to sell you a pill."
Wow.
And so as we start to see that subtext in here of, American reproductive rights are kind of fucked for women, in that, these people can just choose not to sell you the thing you need because of how old you are. They decide the best way to deal from here is to visit a Planned Parenthood clinic, the nearest being a 3-hour drive away. Again, this is another little thing to think about with, and it'd be even worse now because so many of these places that do exist would probably have to have closed. And they, so it turns into I should note, this is a comedy, but with a fairly serious topic at its heart.
Yeah.
This turns into Harold and Kumar go to White Castle for women.
Okay. Without
the weed.
Okay.
And that's kind of a tone with it's kind of a goofy, slightly raunchy comedy, but with a more serious message at its heart rather than just a couple of stoners who really want a burger.
Okay.
As they try and work their way across their state to get to Grand Rapids, to get to the Planned Parenthood clinic in time for Sunny to get the medical treatment that she requires. I don't want to give too much away other than giving me that heads up because this is a wonderful film.
Okay.
This is a fantastic film. This film deals with all those things that we complain about, you and I being cis white men who are probably too old and bitter at the world. If it had anyone listen to us. But we talk. You just talked about it, like representation, window dressing.
Yeah.
We hire Nia DaCosta because of who she is and what she represents. Because not enough African American women get to direct films, and shit, yeah, they don't. So we hire somebody who doesn't seem to have the runs on the board to do the job doesn't do a very good job, according to you. Here we have a story about women. By women, directed by Natalie Morales, who I am not instantly familiar with, but the mainly an actor. She was in Parks and Rec and Girls, I think. Hasn't done a whole lot in terms of directing, but I would not be putting it past her for her to do more because she really shows her chops here. The stars of the film, Sunny is played by Kuho Verma. Lupe is played by Victoria Morales, so it's about women played by young women who are young women of color from very diverse backgrounds. So, I mean, we hear, you don't see a lot of cinema, I guess. I can't think of a lot of cinema that deals with Indian American people.
No. And
there will be a lot of them. They would be a very big subsection. We've talked a lot about Asian American cinema lately.
Yeah.
Everything, everywhere, all at once. Oh my god, how good was Crazy Rich Asians.
Yep.
Yeah, this is more. That's more your Southeast Asian cultures. You know, the South Asian cultures of people from, Pakistan. We're seeing that now a little bit with Miss Marvel. Here, people from India. So that's really great to see a big part of the American community getting someone on the screen looks like them. Hispanic community, obviously, much more representation, but probably still not enough.
And generally, up until like the last few years, at the very least, it's been somewhat stereotypical.
Yes, like drug dealers or whatever. Every time I just love it. They put that yellow filter over everything that happens in Mexico. And they have like that rap song, "The Gasolina," which is a
never sing that at karaoke, dude.
Oh, I'm singing that at karaoke. That's gonna happen. That's a guarantee. But you have to be there. You have to do a duet with me on Ice Ice Baby.
Okay. I will have to learn the dance routine.
To the extreme, like a chump like a candle. There's something in that for all of us. But so the other thing to mention here is there might be a slight spoiler. Is that Lupe is actually LGBT. She's gay or black. And none of it feels tacked on. None of it feels, as rammed into the story as it is in so many other stories now. It's like, this is here because we needed a gay character. We needed an African American character. We needed an Asian character. We needed a Latino character. Tick, 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 tick. Yes, they ticked all the diversity boxes. It felt natural. It felt organic. It didn't feel exploitative. It didn't feel, like I was being lectured to by the film. It just, fine, she's gay, right? It just is. But also, it deals with that in a really interesting way in the fact that her best friend doesn't know she's gay because of where they live. So this is a real story about living in, you've been to the US a little bit, depending which part of the country you go to. It's like going to a completely different country.
Yeah.
Like I stayed in rural Pennsylvania in 2016, and I went straight from there to New York City. And it was like night and day, it was like being in a different country. If you were gay in New York City, who cares, really? Hopefully, I'm talking. I mean, you tell me I'm wrong, but in other parts of the country, it's still a fucking big deal. So I really love how they handled all of that diversity. Because, I mean, we talked about it with the Eternals last year. Eternals was kind of a crap film, but they somehow got the diversity right in that film.
Yeah.
It's weird. Because that just felt natural and normal and not crammed in there. It felt really organic. And the same thing here.
Yep.
Natural, organic, and it fit the story. And it didn't take over the story. The story didn't stop to explain, to show, hey, look how diverse we're being over here. It just flowed into the story beautifully. And they've managed to also tell a really important and interesting story about reproductive rights in the United States in a goofy, raunchy teen sex comedy, which I think takes a great deal of skill.
Yeah.
Regular listeners and viewers of the show will be probably sick of me talking about it over the years, but the best film made about the War on Terror was Harold and Kumar Go to Guantanamo Bay. Because people might have actually seen that one.
Yeah.
they probably didn't see all the others. And that it was funny and it was political. So hard to get right. They've done the same thing here. I don't think it's as good as that. It's not going to win any awards. Some people might find parts of it distasteful if you're, religious or you particularly disagree, I guess, with the film's politics, which are pretty much, again, the film's politics. I don't think it's hiding where it stands. The end might be considered a bit schmaltzy, but I don't know. I kind of feel like if John Hughes were alive today, this might be the kind of film he'd be making. I think he's dead. Hopefully he's dead. He just killed the man if he's not.
We've just killed him. No, he's dead to us.
You're dead, John. I thought he was dead. He is dead. He's been dead since for 10 years. Since 2009.
There you go. We're on the pulse.
I know John didn't necessarily make deeply political films, but it's and maybe it's not as good as a John Hughes film, but I think it's in that ballpark of a kind of film he might have made.
Yeah.
Let's just not overlook some of the more racist stuff that happened in his films.
Yeah.
Long Duck Wong or whatever his name was. I would strongly recommend this to you. I would strongly recommend this to anybody if you got young girls, young kids. If you're comfortable with, I guess over the age of 13, 14, 15 kind of thing, I think you probably know about most of his shit anyway. It's fun. It's representative, it's diverse, and it really just grabs that message home that, you're really putting people into a tough spot where they can make a mistake, like a one-night stand that goes wrong and the protection doesn't work. And there you go. You're really putting someone in a spot where they can't actually do anything about that mistake.
Yeah.
And to a lot of people, that might actually ruin their life or make a big dent in it.
Great. Excellent.
Really,
I'll make
really
sure I
good.
check it out. Now, I'm going to finish us off, if you don't mind, with just putting my thoughts out there, not too spoilery, for Stranger Things 4 Part 2. The last 2 episodes, massive marathon.
It broke the internet, apparently.
Yes, broke Netflix. This is... I have many mixed thoughts on this whole thing. It is very good overall. It ties a lot of things together. It brings things to a conclusion, but it suffers in the same way that Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers did, because you know that there's that last final bit. And they've even come out, and the producers have come out and said, yes, the season 5 is like the Return of the King. It's like, yep, can fucking feel it. And it's because whilst we get payoff, we don't get the full thing. And so every emotional investment that we've had for this season and for the 4 seasons, you're feeling like, okay, that was satisfying to a point, but I wanted more, and we're probably going to get it, but we have to wait 2 years, which is not fun. So it's hard to kind of say, oh, it's fantastic, it's amazing, just because unlike something like Avengers Endgame, which was a movie that was just pure payoff, hence why people love it so much, because it's the culmination of 10 years of hard work and labor and investment, and it's all payoff. They didn't try and set anything up for the next phase of the MCU in that movie. It's like, no, we're closing everything off. This is a hard line, and we are making a big statement of that by having Iron Man die, and that death meaning something. We are gonna have it so that there is certainty and conclusion. You don't have that in this show. What I will say is kind of coming off of our representation conversation for Plan B, and they have done a phenomenal fucking job with the character of Will Byers, going from essentially the MacGuffin of the show in season 1 to having one of the best emotional journeys and best fucking understated performances of one of the most celebrated current TV shows of the last 8 years. Wow. Because in season 1, he's trapped in the Upside Down. He doesn't really get any time to develop the character beyond him him coming across as like the more frail of the core group of boys. And then in season 2, you see him dealing with the repercussions and manifestations of being in the Upside Down and dealing with post-traumatic stress, essentially. And he delivers that really well, but he's being puppeted to a certain degree. So how much is Will, how much is the bad guy. But he played as an actor Noah Schnapper, I think his surname is. He plays it really well. In the third one, he gets to be emotional, teenager, an angsty, hormonal teenager, and we don't care about spoilers for season 3, but we get very clear indication that he could very well be gay. And they play it so well. And there's a particular scene where he just wants to play Dungeons and Dragons with his friends, and they fob him off. And he goes to Byers Castle in the woods, and he just beats it to shit with an axe and just destroys it. He's crying as rain. It is emotional. It is beautiful. You feel your heart breaking for this boy who is desperately trying to cling on to something good in a life that has been so traumatic. And then in season 4, we very quickly, in the first episode or so, we learn that he's actually, at least internally, coming to the conclusion that he is gay and he has feelings for Mike Wheeler. And he has invested time doing this painting for Mike, and everyone in his family thinks that it's a painting for a girl that he likes, they're unaware that it's for Mike. And throughout the first part of the season, he's trying to have these conversations with Mike, and these really heartfelt, emotional conversations that are quintessential masked conversations. Those conversations everyone has where they have a crush on someone when they were young, and they didn't want to be the one to just come out and say, I think I fancy you, I find you attractive, or anything. Just being honest. They like, so what would you do if a friend of yours was kind of attracted to you? What kind of person are you interested in? How are you emotional? You ask all the important questions for this imaginary other person because you want to feel out, am I safe putting my heart on the line? And he does it so well with Mike, and utilizing his kind of sisterly relationship that he's built with 11 since the end of season 3. And then he has this absolutely stunning little conversation. I think it's in the penultimate episode of all of season 4. He's in the back of this pizza delivery thing, and he's just talking to Mike. And Mike is talking about how he's worried about losing Elle and how he really cares for her. And Will just starts talking to him, and it's very clear that he has rehearsed this speech. The only thing that he changes is who it is in reference to, and he just swaps himself for Mike and Mike for Elle, and he just delivers it, and it is beautiful. And then Mike just feels so comforted and supported, and this new fresh bond with his best friend that he's felt distanced from for so long. And then Will just looks out of the window away, and there's just tears in his eyes and his hands shaking, and he's just biting down because he doesn't want to show his feelings. And it's heart-wrenching. Beautiful. It adds onto it. And then they put the fucking cherry on the cake, because at the end of that scene, Jonathan, Will's brother, sees him in the rearview mirror and just clues in. Will isn't giving him advice about 11. He's opening his heart. And rather than having a very typical conversation of brother and brother talking and saying, oh, we never talk anymore, it is pure, honest conversation between two growing young men, and it is fucking beautiful how they talk about Jonathan talks about him being his brother, and no matter what, and really stressing that I think I know what's going on with you, but you are clearly not comfortable with talking about it openly. I am just telling you I don't care. And it's open, honest, and fuck me, Noah, he's so good. He quavers his voice so well. He just says the word yeah, and it's just layered with fucking emotion and love and absolutely stunning performance. And it just gives this, it is, you can feel like it's very accurate of how a young boy must have felt discovering that they were gay during the 80s, and how hard it must be to be with these people who are so closely bonded, these best friends, that you cannot tell this growing internal truth of yourself to. The fact that you don't want them to shun you and ostracize you. And it was absolutely brilliant storytelling, genuinely fantastic. And I just wanted to really talk about that rather than the show, because I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen it yet. Brilliant. Masterclass.
Makes me almost wish I'd stuck it out.
It is just a beautiful, beautiful character arc from season 1 to now. The Noah has just gone from strength to strength as an actor in that role, and it is heavenly. Genuine delight.
Sounds like it was well worth breaking the internet for.
Yes, it was. 100%. But that's all I wanted to talk about for Stranger Things 4 Part 2, which is a tongue twister and a pain in the ass to say.
Well, I mean, now you've only got to wait 2 years and then the spin-off.
Yeah, probably.
No, they are.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I read today that they were doing a spin-off, but I didn't actually. I just read the headline, actually, to be honest. I didn't read who it was going to be about, but apparently they are going to do a Stranger Things spin-off.
All right, fair enough.
And I've seen some stuff from Metallica saying about how much they enjoyed how their music was used.
Yes, so the character Eddie, there are now 2 things in loosely popular zeitgeist to give credence to the quality and importance of the bard in any Dungeons and Dragons group. One of them is Scanlan Shorthold in Critical Role. The other one is Eddie in Stranger Things. Because fucking hell, he rocks it in hell. He does really well. He's a great actor. He really nails it. Being the new person coming into a show with so much hype, that must have been scary as sin. But he gels with the actors. He really nails his performance, and he gets a worthy conclusion, if heartbreaking, but really good. And come on, Metallica, gotta do it.
Well, yeah, Metallica makes any TV show better.
It's true. But I think that brings us to the end of the show this week, ladies and gentlemen. We are coming.
We managed to fill it. We managed to fill the normal time. Somehow we did it. We do it every time.
I talked a lot about nothing. But thank you so much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. This has been episode 152 of Armchair Producers, where we talked about our chain movie of the week, Wake in Fright, care of Travis. We are going to be watching Mutiny on the Bounty, starring Marlon Brando and Richard Harris, two of the old school greats and legends of cinema. We talked about the Trek Respective, of course. And
we are taking donations to see if we can extract Michelle from the hostage takers.
Michelle, if you are watching, we will be having people live on the stream next week who can decipher SOS. So if you want to blink SOS of any location that you may know where you are, where we can send people to help you, just let us know.
Thoughts and prayers.
I don't know if that. I kind of feel dirty saying that. There was the palate cleanser for Travis of Rocky 4. Talked about the delightfully sounding Plan B. I talked about Candyman and Stranger Things 4 Part 2. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. You can catch us every Wednesday evening, about 7:30, maybe a little bit later if I'm running late. But please don't forget to join us at twitch.tv/thefrybrain. Armchair Producers on any good podcasting service usually goes up a week on Sundays. I did miss this week. Sorry for the delay on that one. At The Fried Brain, at Evil Trav on Twitter. We do take your recommendations as well. So if you have a movie or a TV show that you just say, yep, you've got to watch this, give us a reason. It doesn't necessarily have to be because it's amazing. It could be terrible. Let us know, and we will endeavor to watch the movie or at least the first episode or two of a TV show. But for now, thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.